Thank you for connecting very much. And Mongolia, welcome. You might like to select all panelists and attendees to show your information to everybody attending. Thank you for connecting. Okay, and I see Singapore Food Agency is our counterpart. Very welcome to the webinar. I can see a colleague from Papua New Guinea. Welcome to the conference. I see a young student in Ireland. Welcome. Thank you for connecting. Good morning, the Philippines and El Salvador. Thank you for connecting. I wonder what time it is there. Yes, as you can see in the chat box that we are now web streaming our web conference on YouTube. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining the FAO Regional Food Safety Conference for Asia and the Pacific. This is the day 3. Welcome to the conference. We will be starting our webinar in 13 minutes, as you can see on the screen. Now that we are welcoming number of participants, now that I see more than 240 people connected, I see somebody from Indonesia. Welcome. Thank you for telling me the time that El Salvador is 8:44 in the evening. Welcome. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I see somebody from Pakistan. Thank you for writing. You might like to select all panelists and attendee in the to field when you type your message so that everybody can see your message. If you only select all panelists, then only few people can read your message. So try to rewrite your message, selecting all panelists and attendees. And I keep talking because in this way that you can check your audio, that your sound, so that you make sure that you have a good sound quality when the conference starts. 2:47 a.m. in Ireland. Okay, thank you very much. That's very early in the morning, but then we appreciate that your keenness in joining this conference. It's very important to have you on board. Thank you. Good morning, somebody from China and then the Philippines. Thank you. And then I see an industry colleague connecting, and also Malaysia. Thank you for joining. Now I would like to inform everybody that how to actively participate in the conference. So now that I am suggesting everybody to use the chat box to introduce yourself, use all panelists and attendee in the to field, and then type your name and then affiliation, maybe country name or where you are connecting, so that you can interact with other participants, which is almost 250 people. So thank you so much for connecting. Meanwhile, that I would like to explore one more function on the screen. If you mouse over the screen, you will see the menu called Q&A. Right now, I have to kindly ask you not to type anything in the Q&A box, but then you can take a look at the Q&A box. You can see that there that you can ask questions. So when the conference starts, I will kindly ask you to use this Q&A box to start asking questions to the speakers and then also the panelists. And when you do that, I would love to have you write the name of the speakers or panelists to address your question too. So please write the name of the person that you want to ask questions to. Today's speaker that before the break, we will have two distinguished speakers, Mr. Sanjay Dave from India, and then also Ms. Hannah Zhang from China. And then after break, we have Ms. Ifan Jan, who is the facilitator for the panel discussion. And then another person, the first panelist is Mr. Bilami Manu, and from Tonga, and then also dear Mr. Polutu Laidonchudin. He is from Samoa. So we will be asking you to write the question in the Q&A box once the conference starts, and then write the name of the speaker so that you'll be able to ask the questions, and then the facilitator will be picking the questions from the Q&A box so that we can have interactive sessions. I hope that is clear to everybody. And then it has been wonderful on the day 1 and day 2 that we are taking the questions from the Q&A box. And then it has been great that the participants are actively engaged in the discussion. So we should be able to include everybody in these discussions. If the time does not allow to pick all the questions during the webinar, then we will make sure to have those questions answered by panelists and speakers later, so that you can find written questions and written answers in the final report, which FAO will be publishing. So we will make sure to address everything that we receive. So even if your questions are not picked during the session, don't worry that we will make sure to pick them after the conference. So please make sure that you are actively engaged in the discussion. Okay, so during the session that you are now seeing the screen that we have some notes on it. We are saying that as long as the presenters agree that we will be sharing the presentation files with the participants who registered to the meeting. So you will receive the presentation files if the presenter agreed to share the presentation files. And all 4 sessions are recorded, this conference, and then it is already being live streamed on YouTube. So meaning that on FAO YouTube channel that this conference recordings are available. So we will be sharing the YouTube link to everybody on the chat box, and then you will see the link to the YouTube channel. And if your colleagues or friends are interested in the conference, please do share this link so that they can at least watch the YouTube videos or live stream while they don't have to register to the Zoom meeting. But then in the Zoom meeting, great thing is that you are able to actively interact with the speakers and panelists. So that's how it works. And then also an email will be sent to all the attendees with the link to generic certificate at the end of the conference, probably in early December. So if you require a certificate, just to wait, make sure to attend, because Zoom has a function to collect email addresses who attended the webinar. The registration only does not work. So you need to attend the webinar fully to receive the link to the certificate. Certificate is going to be a generic one because we have more than probably close to 1,500 registrations. So we won't be able to personalize the certificate, but then we should be able to send a link to the certificate to your email address. So hopefully that addresses your need. Now that we have 5 minutes left, and then I will start welcoming other people who have attended, joined this conference later minutes. Now that I see 2 people from Bangladesh recently joined, I see that people are writing lots of comments. Welcome to the webinar. Choose all panelists and attendees when you type your greeting messages in the chat box so that everybody can see your message. Now that we have about 4 minutes left before the conference officially starts, we would like to start with a video. It is about food safety and in India, and then the policy makers speak up for safer food for India. So enjoy the video, and then after the video, we will start the conference.
Food safety is enormously important for India. We have a population of 1.35 billion people, and the challenges that we face in terms of malnutrition, micronutrient deficiency, and in terms of the rampaging non-communicable diseases are so large that we have to find solutions that are different. The first step that we took was to bring in the Food Safety and Standards Act in 2006, followed by the setting up of the authority in 2008. We have notified standards for approximately 14,000 categories of food products, additives, and colors. We've also set up a network of 188 primary laboratories and 12 referral laboratories. We have brought in regulations for newer areas such as trans fat labeling, organic food, front of pack labeling, and menu labeling. We have a very innovative system of capacity building, and that is the FOSTAC training. We have 140 training partners who administer training and capacity building to stakeholders according to curriculum designed by us. A very important piece is the use of IT technology in order to be able to manage the scale of our operations. The FOSTAC system is our licensing and certification system that covers licensing, inspections, and links also to our testing and the import systems. We've also brought in tools for building capacity and voluntary compliance by industry, food businesses, and that takes the form of hygiene rating and third-party audits, which are voluntarily adopted by food business operators. Eat Right India was actually an approach to take a systems approach and to also make both the food businesses as well as the consumers a part of the system. A very interesting approach which I think is going to build the next generation of leaders, which is the Eat Right challenges for districts, for cities, and even to engage our partnership of stakeholders through the NetProfan. So I think these efforts are really creating the leadership which will take Eat Right India forward. We've been a member of the Codex Alimentarius Commission since it was set up in 1964. And in 2015, we took over as the regional coordinator for Asia. And over the last 5 years, our focus has been on fostering cooperation and standard development in Asia. We've hosted 2 very successful CC Asia meets, and we have also been part of setting up 2 group projects under the Codex Trust Fund, which have been well received and have built capacity of the membership. I think, and we also host the Herbs and Spices Committee of the Codex, and in this capacity we are working steadily and strongly to generate the standards for these very vital condiments most efficiently. So I think we have been very much a part of the Codex system, We worked in recent years with the FAO to also conduct a study on food fraud and measures to address this. And I think that it's in this direction that we would seek to work further in the years ahead with the FAO.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. From Bangkok, Thailand, from the FAO Regional Office for Asia and Pacific, and welcome to day 3 of the Regional Food Safety Conference. First of all, we hope that wherever you are safe and healthy, and you're all observing the necessary precautions in terms of wearing masks and hand sanitization. That is one of the lessons that will actually have a very positive effect on food safety in the first place. We also hope, and thank you for joining us again in good numbers. We are approaching 300 already. And this is following the excellent participation from all of you that we had on the 2 days last week. On both days, we exceeded 400 and 450, and we have now more than 1,000 views on YouTube. So those of you who missed the first 2 days last week can go to YouTube and hear and watch the entire recordings, including the excellent presentations that were made on both the days. So the Regional Food Safety Conference, which is spread over 4 days, we had the first day, which was on national food control systems, the second one on the underpinning of science and data and evidence for food safety. Today, we'll be talking about food standards, about smallholders, and about the private sector. And day after tomorrow, on Thursday, we'll be talking about risk communication and long-term capacity building for food safety. So just to recap, on day 1, we heard about food control systems in general, the elements, the building blocks, and we also heard about 3 very specific country examples, actually 4 of them, from Bangladesh, Myanmar, Nepal, as well as on how these systems are structured right now, what the kind of changes they are undergoing due to the new laws that are being passed and the new regulations that are being developed. On day 2, we talked more about the science which underpins food control. Because what's important to always realize in these days of social media, of websites, of easy access to news at the drop, at literally you can forward it with your thumb, is that food safety is based on science. It's not based on hearsay, it's not based on news. And this science is underpinned by many methods, both in methods of analysis, in chemistry, in microbiology, in physics, and several disciplines of science, which actually give us the results which enable food safety regulators to make rules, set standards, set limits, and then regulate food safety. So we heard much about this on Thursday last. We first had Bob Baker, who came to us from Mars, which is one of the big multinational companies in the food industry. He spoke to the audience on how a big company like that manages food chains which span continents. They manage big volumes of food products, including fresh produce, and they ensure how these big volumes are actually kept safe, both through the supply chain, through storage, through transport, through safe processing, and to ensure that a safe product reaches every consumer. So there are lessons here to be learned on the importance of preventive approaches across food chains, where they need to be employed to prevent pathogens or chemicals or physical contaminants from entering the chain, guarding the entry points, and ensuring verification so that each supplier is actually verified, or rather the produce that each supplier actually gives to the company is verified to be safe. And therefore, this actually puts prevention at the forefront of food safety. So preventive approaches across the food chain. And this is one of the underlying principles that were also dealt with on day 1. We then had Dr. Delia Grace from the International Life Trust Research Institute, who, apart from having recently authored a very well received book recently on the pandemic, talked a lot about risk prioritization based on the knowledge of hazards. And here she had some very interesting and sometimes probably contrarian views expressed on how these risks should be prioritized, especially for the people, and how they should be prioritized by regulators for mitigating so that safe food is made available to the consumer. So she produced some very interesting data from, particularly from Africa, but also from Asian countries, and looked at the ones which actually cause the maximum deaths or the maximum harm to people. And therefore, she emphasized that these were the ones that needed more emphasis rather than some of the other ones which actually were captured in the news. So she also spoke much about the Pareto principle, which is that 80% of the foodborne illnesses or disorders are actually caused by 20% of the risks being identified, and therefore we need to focus more on that. But of course, there is also the case to be made of a long tail, and that's always a part of food safety. There are many, many hazards and risks which authorities, regulators, and the private sector need to be very aware of. We then had the specific presentations, one by my colleague Masami, on the risk analysis framework, on how risk is, and she walked us through the entire framework, which is on risk assessment, management, characterization, and management, and looked at the steps of prioritization of these risks. So this is the normative approach, which is prescribed both by FAO and WHO. So this is the approach which is taken all over the world on to look on how to prioritize risks based on data and evidence. And again, here we bring back the important core point of day two: data and evidence, which is reliable, consistent, and synthesized using good practices, laboratory in the laboratory, as well as validated methods of analysis are crucial. And how these, and she also explained how then these influence the risk management decisions that regulators have to make almost on a daily basis. We then also had two very specific presentations on specific food safety issues. One was on Streptococcus agalactiae, a particular strain called ST183, which is in this region, which actually caused a major incident in Singapore a couple of years ago. And then Dr. Tim Barkham began to trace this strain, not just in Singapore, but across the region in many countries. And he showed us on many interesting data on where and how this pathogen is actually spreading through the region, particularly through the fish, the tilapia, which is then being consumed by consumers, and there are issues that the GBS toxin produced by this particular bacterium is causing in terms of illness. And we then also had a presentation by Dr. Putima from Kasetsart University in Thailand, who talked about Clostridium spore germination and its inactivation. Clostridium, as we know, is a major foodborne pathogen, and the methods that she spoke about are ones which are being developed for the processing industry, and some of them already being used by the processing industry to disactivate this pathogen. So here on day two, we actually looked at a lot of particular examples of how science serves food safety and how this can actually be used for regulations and risk management. So taking a cue from there, and when we spoke about looking at being able to control food safety across supply chains or exercise good practices and standards, that's what brings us into day three. And today's session is about learning from the experts in standards, trade, industry, and small-scale farmers. And we will start with our first speaker of the day, who is Mr. Sanjay Dave. Mr. Sanjay Dave worked for many, many years for APIDA, for the government of India. He has been a frequent and very well acclaimed senior international consultant on food safety to FAO, WHO, ITC, and as well on many SPS projects. and he has been an advisor to the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, the FSSAI. One of his key roles that he has played is to be the chairperson of the Codex Alimentarius Commission, which, as you would all know, is the FAO-WHO body, which is a neutral platform for all countries to come together, about 188 of them to come together and work together on food standards formulation. So today, Dr. Dave will be talking to us on the national context of food safety. And I welcome Mr. Dave to this conference. Thank you very much for taking the time. I know you have a lot going on and a lot of demands on your time, but thank you very much for taking time to be here, Mr. Dave. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Sridhar, and FAO for inviting me to this conference. And I was asked to talk about the trade aspects as related to food safety, or vice versa, on day 3. And that is what I try to bring together in a very short presentation as a keynote, just to highlight at the end of my presentation the key points on which everyone should focus, all the countries should focus, so that trade, international trade or regional trade, can increase, at the same time ensure safety of the health of consumers in your own country. So what I present to you today is I'm going to examine the impact of non-compliances to food safety, and what are the action points that come out for better food security, trade, and tourism. And tourism has an impact if there is no food safety in a country. So I will pose some questions. Why do exports decrease from a country? If exports are going down, it is probably because of non-compliance to the standards of the importing countries, because that is a requirement of the SPS agreement, that the exporting country is supposed to meet the standards of the importing country, and lack of implementation of the best practices, including traceability. Sorry. So which essentially tells us that if there is a lack of commitment to food safety, then exports can decline. And for ensuring that there is a good commitment to food safety, there is a need for awareness about international standards, which in the context of food safety is Codex, and training is a very important part of it. So if exports decline, then it also reduces the negotiating capability of the country for greater market access. Because when you negotiate with the partner country, you got to talk on equal terms. And if your own terms are at a low level in terms of food safety compliances, then you lose that negotiating capacity. So on the other side, on the flip side, why do imports increase? So imports increase because countries have better spending power, lifestyles have changed, women have started working. So you got to depend on ready-to-eat products. You are looking for new products from the global market because people are traveling all over the world. There's a lot of awareness about nutrition. And in case as I said, the exporting country has to meet the standards of the importing country. And if your own standards are at a low level, then substandard food will start coming into your country. So a lot of dumping takes place of substandard food, which gives rise to the point that it gives us clarity that there is a lack of commitment to food safety, and at the same time awareness about international standards. So in both the situations, if exports are going down and imports are increasing, the common denominator is lack of commitment to food safety. And that is what is important. We got to ensure that there is a commitment to food safety. We have seen what has happened during the COVID times, whether it is COVID or no COVID. The requirement of food safety exists. It will continue forever. And we got to be aware of what is happening internationally. So in a situation, in the situation of an ineffective food control system in a country, if exports decline and imports increase, then what suffers? It is the domestic market that suffers. It is the people of the country that suffer. So what is the result in that case? It leads to hunger, it leads to poverty, food wastage, less nutrition, more substandard food coming into your country, limited global negotiating position, decline in business interest, less tourists, and at the end, a negative trade balance. And no country would like to have a negative trade balance. So this is what happens if there is a lack of commitment to food safety and lack of awareness about international standards. So what is it that needs to be done? You heard in the beginning a video from the chairperson of the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. India set up the Food Safety Act and an organization called the Food Safety Authority of India. So most important thing is to set up an effective food regulatory body. Every country needs that, and a single body. What used to happen in India before is that the food safety was scattered to various ministries and various departments and various organizations. So it was all brought under one umbrella. So it's important to have an effective food regulatory body, a single body which looks after the regulatory aspects of food. And then what is important is to align your standards with international standards, because that is what the SPS agreement talks about. If you align your standards with Codex, this is what we did in India. Mrs. Rita Tiotia mentioned several thousand food standards, including food additives, that were aligned with Codex, and that is where we took off. We started this harmonization process in 2012 and completed it in 2016, but this is a dynamic process. So it's important to align with Codex, to be on the international plane and work with your partner countries, and that improves your negotiating capacity. And for that matter, you got to participate very actively in Codex discussions. Industry even needs to collaborate. Industry needs to participate. Industry needs to communicate to the national Codex contact points as to what exactly is required to be done. What will help improve food safety in your country? What is going to help enhance trade, enhance exports, enhance market access? And at the same time, you got to upgrade your laboratory infrastructure. And training, capacity building at all levels of the value chain, starting from the farmers right up to the end, manufacturing level, retail, transportation, at all stages, including the food inspectors and the laboratory analysts. Capacity building at every stage is required, whether it is production, manufacturing, transportation, retailing, inspection, analysis, whatnot, anything that is covered by the food safety umbrella. Capacity building is required, and that is what FAO and WHO and ITC, they continuously engage with countries, developing countries, to build that capacity, and which is very critical. What else needs to be done? Educate your consumers. Your consumers need to be aware. The consumers need to demand safe food. And if they demand safe food, the manufacturers will produce it accordingly. So all these things put together is important, and make sure that you work as a team. It is a teamwork. No one individual or an organization can do it. When we did harmonization in India, it was a PPP approach. We worked with colleagues in Bangladesh, and I was personally present there. A lot of initiative was taken by the Bangladesh Food Safety Authority to align standards with international standards, which is Codex. So for the industry, the focus points should be, and government should facilitate that, the food regulator needs to facilitate that, implement best practices, whether it is good agricultural practices or hygienic practices or HACCP for high-risk products. All aspects of the food safety management systems need to be implemented at different stages of the value chain. Traceability is very critical. If at some point of time there is an opportunity, I can explain to you how we implemented traceability in India in the horticulture sector, and how we utilize the Codex texts to enhance market access and to regain a lost market which was lost because of some food safety issue. We'll see at some other point. But traceability, and today blockchain has taken a predominant role. So implement best practices coupled with traceability. Strengthen your food safety, food testing mechanism. Bring in surveillance programs. Many countries still lack surveillance programs. FAO has developed an excellent document on how to carry out surveillance in your country. High-risk products, low-risk products, all together, all put together. The sum and substance is surveillance along the value chain and take corrective measures. Food safety cannot be built in one day. Rome was not built in a day. Food safety is not possible in one day. It's a process. And you got to address every stage. That is what I bring from my little experience of about 45 years. Countries need to invest in risk assessment. Codex standards are voluntary standards. Countries need to adopt or adapt. But invest in risk assessment activities. You have had a session yesterday on risk assessment. Collection of data. Be aware of what is happening. And that is why surveillance and risk assessment are linked to each other. And at the end, I would like to suggest, please focus on food safety education. Many countries have programs on food technology, food microbiology, nutrition, undergraduate programs, postgraduate programs. But many countries lack a formal course on food safety education. We developed some programs in India. I led a group of experts, some professors and industry people, leading industry people, like-minded people, and we developed a postgraduate diploma program on food safety. A certificate course, a 6-month certificate course, a standalone course on food regulatory affairs, food regulatory matters, your own national regulations and regulations of other countries. What is happening in ASEAN countries? What is happening in South Asia? What is happening in Japan or European Union or North America? What are the regulatory systems? What are the best practices that you can learn from them? And that should be a part of that certificate program, a 6-month. This will really build capacity in a country. So my request to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, today is to focus on some of these points that I have just mentioned in these last few slides as to what steps need to be taken. And I'm sure FAO would be thinking as to how to develop programs around these so that food safety can be enhanced in every country. I know I have seen people joining in this session today from all over the world. from all over the world, starting from South America, Central America, United States, right up to the East, Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, which is a very good thing. And I commend all of you for participating in this program. Please focus on these points. These points will help to ensure food safety in your own country, safety of your own consumers, and will enhance trade. We all are, most of us are members of the WTO. When we talk of trade, it's both exports and imports. We don't want substandard food to come into our country, and we want to export also. So we got to upgrade our standards. We've got to implement best practices, focus on traceability surveillance programs. And to build that in the future, invest in food safety education. That is what I would like to present today in short in this keynote address. And I wish you happy deliberations and good discussions today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dave, for the excellent presentation. If you could please unshare your screen, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, so I have a couple of questions before that I open up the floor. The first question is from your experience as a chairperson of the Codex Alimentarius, and then also you have seen the region improving the food safety and food control systems tremendously from various countries' efforts. What do you see as the biggest potentials in the region? And then also, what could be the challenging issues that the region has to tackle together? Over to you.
Okay, the biggest potential is the sheer diversity of products that we have in the South Asian and Southeast Asian region. That is a very strong point. A number of cuisines are there. You've seen the video. A variety of produce at the farm level and at the processed level is available. The challenge today is ensuring or generating consumer confidence. And consumer confidence can come if we can prove beyond doubt that we have complied with all the regulatory requirements. We have ensured food safety at all levels of the chain, and we can prove traceability of the product. If you pick up a pouch of grapes in a supermarket, you should be able to track it to the farm from where it has come, who has packed it, who has tested it, what was the spray record of the pesticides. If you can do that, I think that will give a lot of confidence to the people. And the challenges lie there. And that is what I have really observed. And whatever programs have to be introduced to implement these practices, which I just explained, should be sustainable, should be replicable. Only then the success will come from there.
Thank you very much. So I understand it's kind of like a front and back of the flipped coin, basically, that the big potential can become a big challenge, and then a big challenge, we can turn it around to the opportunities for the region, I understand. Another question before I open up the floor, I already see some questions in the Q&A box, so may I kindly suggest all the participants to start writing the questions to Mr. Dave. my question is about trade. So now that we are under this global situation of the pandemic, obviously that this situation at least slowed down a little bit of this globalization of the trade. But then many say that the globalization will not end. It may change the shape of the globalization, but then we will keep expanding this globalization trend. So what do you think about the situation in Asia and the Pacific, that how our food trade will turn into, and then what is the implication to the food safety management? Over to you.
Okay, let us understand this very clearly. And I said that before. COVID has been a setback to all of us, for sure. In our personal lives, in our business lives, in our education lives, everywhere, in our travels, tourism, sure, it has put us a little behind. But let's take this as an opportunity. Let us see the positive side of this pandemic. The positive side is it has really given us an electric shock and has made us to work towards ensuring the best practices. Many people even in India for that matter, many poor people never knew that you got to wash your hands. Today, even a child knows it. My granddaughter, who is less than 2 years old, she goes for a walk in the evening. As soon as she comes back, she will put off her shoes outside the door and rush to the bathroom, to the washroom, to wash her hands. So that awareness has come. A lot of training programs have gone, I have seen throughout the country in India and in other countries, to educate people on worker safety, on consumer safety. It has been an experience to see how food safety has been enhanced at every stage. Now, even farmers are looking at that. Manufacturers are looking at that. I am many times I am giving training to many manufacturers in India to what you need to do at different stages. Even for those who are, you order food online and food delivery boys come, you see how they have changed their attitude, their approach to food safety. Now, this is an opportunity, and we need to sustain that and make sure that we continue with this. Whether COVID was there or not, food safety is important and will always remain important.
Thank you very much. That's very enlightening. I will start picking some questions from the floor. The first person is asking, in India, that which organization or organizations leading the food safety education? Over to you.
Okay, there are a few universities in India that are giving education in food safety. For example, very close to New Delhi, there is an institution called NIFTIM, which provides education in food safety areas. Then there is another one in Rajasthan. There's one in Puducherry. There are a few universities who have started programs on food safety, undergraduate programs. And when we designed these courses on food safety education, this certificate course and 1-year diploma program, this was presented to all the universities in the country, and you can see the course content, the outline of the course content on the website of CII-SKA. CII stands for Confederation of Indian Industry. SKA stands for Surakshit Khadya Abhiyan, which is in Hindi, but the English term is National Mission for Food Safety, and I happen to be the chair of that organization. And their website you can see, and I will put that in the chat box in a few minutes. And you can access that information on that website, and universities can start. Countries can encourage the universities in their country to start these programs. Thank
Excellent. I agree that there might be a leading agency, but then it doesn't have to be one. That everybody can collaborate together and then start sending the proper and then appropriate message to the consumers. I think that is the success of the food safety education. Thank you.
Yes.
Another
Absolutely.
question that I have is that somebody is asking about the traceability program that you have emphasized the importance of, and then traceability program for the traditional food market and then also the modern supermarket. How can you make it effective for both systems? What do you think? Do you have any insights that how the agencies or how people in the front line can make sure that the traceability systems work in the future? Over to you.
Okay, thank you. See, what is most important is the the authenticity or the credibility of the data that you enter. You got to develop a software. When we started this, we did not have a software. We only had a paper document. You can still go to the EPIDA website and see that paper document. It is still there. And we started with farmer registration, and every stage was a part of that document. When we found that, and we knew that this is going to be a little cumbersome for the people, we converted that into a software. We created small modules, and then we clubbed all the modules. Now, what is important is you can have a software, but the credibility of the data that you enter is important. So that message has to go across at every stage of the value chain, the importance of the correctness of the information, and therefore importance of the best practices assumes importance. You implement the best practices, you enter correct data, at the end you will get a right output. Now, whether it is a horticulture produce or a manufactured product. Now, we did the same thing in the case of manufactured products as well. For example, organic products. We created a very complex traceability solution, which not only included the raw material production, but it also included manufacturing, trading, and distribution. All aspects were there, and at every stage you got to be sure that the information entered, and therefore now the latest requirement to ensure credibility is the blockchain. If you implement blockchain, you can be assured of a good outcome. Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes. Another question, probably this is the last question at this moment. This person is thanking you very much for sharing the insights of food safety and related with trade. And then this person would like to know about your thinking of this current situation where different countries have a different food safety requirements in the region, and then how the Codex or FAO can play a role in it. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. And this is a very good question. Yes, it is true that different countries have different levels of protection. If you see the SPS agreement, that it allows countries to specify their levels of protection and therefore different standards or different legislations. The world knew about this, And the Codex encourages countries to align with the international standards. And the international standards, which are voluntary standards, they're not mandatory. These voluntary standards have been created through a consensus. There are 188 countries plus the European Union that are members of Codex. They all sit together and agree on a standard, which is an international standard, which is the Codex standard. So that is the common meeting point. It helps to facilitate the trade. It helps to sort out issues between two trading partners. It saves a lot of time. And these are all standards based on science, based on scientific risk assessment. And since this has been done, the countries don't have to reinvent the wheel of doing the science. You can accept Codex standards as your national standards. You can adapt or adopt to them. Countries, however, they are encouraged to align with Codex, but countries still have the option of having stricter standards. But this stricter standards has to be based on scientific justification. You got to provide data. So when you notify a legislation to the WTO as a draft standard, you got to fill out a form and tick mark whether it is based on international standards or it is not. If it is not based on international standards, countries will ask you for the information. On what basis are you stricter than Codex? Can you provide the data? And the country that has put up that draft notification for comments by the WTO members is obliged to provide that information as to why their standards are stricter than Codex. What is that level of protection which demands higher standards, stricter standards? What is the data that you have? Please, you've got to provide that data. You've got to share that data to the country that has asked that question. So Codex, therefore, is the best standard that can be followed by the trading partners. So that will facilitate not only regional trade, but global trade. And the role that FAO has been playing and can continue to play is to facilitate that process, to help countries. Countries sometimes do not know how to go about doing harmonization of all the standards. It is not just copy and paste. Copy and paste is 5 minutes job. You got to review the international standards and see what are your country's needs and then align accordingly. We did that. We started that in 2012, December. It took us few years to complete that process. We set up small scientific groups to review the international standards and see what is our national requirement, and then decide what you want. You can be stricter than Codex. You got to provide data, or you can align with Codex. So FAO can play a very definitive role in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dave. That yes, I have this very strong, responsible feeling about helping, also assisting the countries. But then also that during the process of assisting, I do learn a lot from the countries too. That each country has different systems, but then the purpose, objectives are the same. The public health protection, and then this trade facilitation, and then towards the same goal for the food security, and then there is no food security without food safety. So I think that we can really tackle the challenge all together in the region to go together, and then FAO would like to help the process. So with this, thank you very much, Mr. Dave, that I would really like you to stay online so that you can join the discussion later, just in a few moments. But then I would like to introduce the next speaker. So thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you,
Mr.
Masami.
Dave. Talk to you soon. Okay,
Yes.
so this is my pleasure to introduce the next speakers. Next speaker is Ms. Hannah Chan. She is the Deputy General Manager of Government Affairs Department of the company called Alibaba. Everybody knows that Alibaba local service company of Alibaba Group. She's from China. And prior to the Alibaba company, that she was a senior manager for the International Government Affairs Department at JDCO. Now that her title of the speech is Digitalization for Resilient Food Systems. And before that, her talk, that I am going to give the floor to Ms. Hannah Chan. That previous speaker's name is Mr. Dave, so you are addressing the questions to Mr. Dave. And the next keynote speaker is Ms. Hannah. So if you would like to ask her questions, please type her name in the Q&A box so that we can know that you are asking questions to Hannah. So with that, Hannah, thank you so much for your precious time to be with us. And then floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you about introducing me. Okay.
Miss Hannah, that your microphone is a little bit far from your voice. Could you try to speak into the microphone,
Oh,
please?
I just used the earphone. Is that
Okay,
okay?
that now perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hannah Zhang, and I come from the Alibaba Local Services Business Unit of Alibaba Group. Today, I'm very honored to participate our conference and give this speech. The topic of my speech is digitalization for resilient food systems. And next, I will focus on the four parts to give this speech. Firstly, I would like to introduce our business, and then next, I will conclude what do we do during the COVID-19 and how we expected recovery of food supply chain by digital means. And then the most important part is the Blue Planet Plan to promote the sustainable development of the food supply chain. Finally, I will sharing the international program to everyone. Okay, and let's begin from the introduction. In October 2018, Alibaba Group officially announced the establishment of Alibaba Local Services Company by merging and Koubei to form a leading consumer service platform in China. And the means "Do you hungry?" Yes, in Chinese. And mainly engages in the deliver to home, takeout business, new retail, instant delivery, and the catering supply chain. And Koubei focuses on the consume in shop, offline consumption services. Our company is a significant core of Alibaba Group, as well as an important layout of Alibaba Group in the field of broad consumption. And now our platform has 290 million annual active consumers, more than 100 directly managed cities, and 850,000 active riders, and 2.5 million active merchants in more than 600 cities and more than 2,000 of districts and countries across China. And completely a comprehensive upgrade of its brand and services in July of this year, expanding from the catering and the takeout to delivery services of all categories, such as a supermarket and super convenience and fresh fruits and vegetables, medicine and health, flowers and green plants, cosmetics and pets, and providing more consume in-store services, forming a perfect local life circle. And our platform not only cover the restaurant consumption scene, but also we covering the hotel, the shopping mall, and the fresh food bookstore, museum, and cinema as well. The whole chain about our business from the front end, middle end to the back end. At the front end, including the information and the trading system, such as in-store consumption, mobile payments, delivery, and cashier lineup pre-order. You know, in China, we always see so many people to line up for one restaurant. So we offer the pre-ordering the technology. So at the middle and amidst our operation and the marketing system, including the CRI, marketing management, performance management, and the membership system. At the back end, such as the talent, training, and communication system. Okay, and next I would like to talk about how we can expect the recovery of a food supply chain by the digital means during the COVID-19. Okay, since the January 30, our platform came up with commission deductions and exemptions, help the merchant get online our platform rapidly and offered some financial support and marketing traffic support. Thus, to support fight against the COVID-19 and guarantee the supply. And then since the March 14, we add more digital means for support worker resumption, such as a POS and SOS system, contactless delivery, and a transparent restaurant, and some free training, the live streaming, and company food ordering, and something like that. And now we would like to focus on the food safety with a new technology. Firstly, full of our business coverage by the contactless delivery with the optical character recognition technology. The takeaway receipt is not only displaying the old information, but also as a seal sticker tracing the food and the presenting information, including the temperature of the cook and the delivery person who it is, and secondly, to maintain the social distancing, contactless delivery is promoted with the automatic guided car to deliver the food based on the purchase ledger and price monitoring. And thirdly, through the live broadcasting of bright kitchens, consumers could remotely observe the management and cooking operations in the kitchens of restaurants where they decide to order food or not. And fourth, through another equipment, we call it 客如云. This is an intelligent catering management solutions provider. We connect the restaurant and food processors with smart vegetable markets. It enables the functions of food traceability, food safety risk monitoring, visual information display, and blockchain license storage. Moreover, focus on the supplying of daily necessaries with new service during the Spring Festival. We kept operating without increasing price of daily necessities. At least 25 people can stay at home when one rider keeps working. It means one rider can cover 25 people's daily need. And furthermore, pay attention to the supplies for the frontline workers. With new welfare program during the COVID-19, our riders delivered more than 400,000 meals for free to hospital in the 37 cities, and cooperated with more than 10 governments and distributed more than 8.3 million medical masks. And next, let's move to the next part. What are we doing about sustainable development of the food supply chain? We have 3 meals and 5 reduction about green environmental production. It's including the tableware, the meals, and eating habits. reducing the quantity of the tableware and reducing using the package, the lunch box, and reducing the waste at the end of the sales, eat less, and together with association and the government to get the consumer. Firstly, about the tableware, we have a no cutlery option when consumer placed order on our platform. And this option is cover all merchants now. And our app Erlem has 300 million orders with no cutlery so far, which is equal to a direct reduction of 4,800 tons of carbon emissions, and also as same as the planting more than 265,000 trees in the desertification area. And in September 2017, our app Erlem launched a blueprint for the sustainable development of the food supply chain. We call it Erlem Blue Planet Project, and we set up a sustainable lab. The Blue Planet Plan Alliance has been established with partners in more professional fields. From the perspective of the whole life cycle, the whole value chain of the food delivery industry, the platform to explore sustainable solutions for the food delivery packaging and create shared value. About the first environment protection package group standard in China since the December of 2017, and the guidance of relevant organization, the government in Shanghai, Erlem has the drafting team leader, combined several units to participate in this standard, using the paper-based material as a transition scheme of reducing the oil-based material application. Reducing the takeout packaging industry depend on the degree of petroleum based on the products. The group's standards were fully implemented in Shanghai in June 2018. Subsequently, Erlem placed a first batch of paper bowls in the Shanghai with the amount of 1 million. And moreover, Erlem released the country's first standard for the sustainable packaged material for takeout in the October 2018. The standard mainly include reducing the use of disposal tableware, reducing the excessive packaging for the takeout, improving the reusability and the recycling of takeout catering bags, and encouraging the application of environmentally friendly alternative material in overall takeout packaging solutions. And Erlem get merchants to purchase the package and the tableware from our safe directory enterprises. In order to solve the problem that small and medium-sized businesses cannot buy the biodegradable plastic bags due to the purchase quantity. This means are helpful for reducing the packaging in the intermediate progress. Okay, and refer to the reducing waste at the end of the sales. The environmental risk caused by the irregular handing of takeout plastic lunch boxes is a topic that Erlem has been paying attention to. For this reason, Erlem has worked with many recycling industry partners to actively focus on the recycling, disposal, and the reuse of plastic boxes in the takeout field, and also explore the solutions. For takeout plastic packaging products that cannot be cancelled or replaced in the short term, we actively explore its recycling path and carry out recycling pilot activities in commercial district and office building with a high orders based on platform data and user announcements. And cooperate with policymakers, municipal sanitation departments, and communities, property management centers, third-party recycling agencies, and other parties. From this left picture, in the February 2018, Erlem successfully launched the first closed-loop link focusing on the sorting and the recycling of takeaway garbage in Shanghai. In the 2-month trial, a total of 421 kilograms of plastic boxes were collected. After a series of back-end steps such as cleaning and deep processing, 350 kilograms of recycled takeout plastic pellets were obtained. These pellets were reprocessed and upgraded into 21 succulent pellets. Flower pots seem to have a completely gorgeous transformation of takeout plastic. And from this right-hand red picture, our app and other throwing platform have recycled a total of 390 kilograms of takeout plastics, reducing the carbon emission about 585 kilograms, reducing the energy consumption by about more than 2,000 kilowatt hour, reducing the landfill volume by about more than 20 cubic meter. The above data is calculated based on the relevant models of the WHO and UI's Environmental Protection Agency. And by the way, in September 2020, the fashion brand clothes made from recycled plastic bottles, the 2020 Spring Joint Series officially appeared in Shanghai. And in October 2019, following the episode of Shanghai Fashion Week, we joined hands with the Bronze Lucia to launch a co-branded, environmentally friendly, limited edition catwalk series. And the concept of recycling goes deep into daily life. And starting in the 2020, has joined hands with the China Foundation of Poverty Alleviation to launch a half meal for love on our platform. The merchants participate in this activity and provide half portion services for takeaway. It means you can order the half portion rice, half portion vegetables, and half portion gongbao jiding, something like that, and providing the consumers with a more economical and more cost-effective and richer dining options. Since this implementation of the plan, we have 700,000 restaurants have joined this activity. On this basis, we further launched the half plan charity action, and the relevant grants were coordinated and arranged by the China Foundation for Poverty Alleviation, and used to send love meals to each child in poverty-stricken areas. A box of milk and a braised egg are provided to ensure the high-quality protein and other nutrition they need every day. And then on the 3rd of July, the National Development and Reform Commission, Low Carbon of China, and us jointly initiated the Low Carbon Life Festival and formed a memorandum of cooperation. Green and low carbon life ideas were advocated via live streaming, and eco-friendly products were selected to sell. To further release the residents' experience and the potential in energy conservation. Okay, therefore, in China, we did a lot of activities, as I mentioned before, and internationally, on the 27th August, the Asia Pacific section of the our FAO official website officially released the element innovative measures in the food supply chain during the COVID-19. Meanwhile, Alibaba Group also sharing it at our first Food Loss and Waste Day. Also focus on the activity, Alibaba Charity and the Alibaba Charity to hold that Zero Food Challenge project on our platform from September 1 to 10. FAO China office, and we jointly with them, we all did press the releases through the official channels during that event. And about reputation, on the 16th October of this year, our writer Fu Tenghu, he's very honored to awarded to be shortlisted as the food hero selected by the World Food Day. And in 2020, this year, Element together with FAO and the CAS established a joint lab. And October 1st, we discussed with the e-learning team at FAO headquarters and the CAS team how to conduct training and advocacy on the three sides about rather the merchant and the consumer, about food loss and waste. And lastly, I'd like to brief our introduction about our international communication project about food and culture. We call it the Green Life and the Taste Asia. Actually, we plan to launch the national country pavilion all over the China with online promotion and offline ceremony together. And on the 12th October, we have launched the Asia Pavilion at the first. This national pavilion will be including the restaurant and any other products from these countries. And this is the pictures on that day of the event. We were so honored to invite the officer in charge, FAO representative in China, and the program management officer of UNEP in China, and Royal Thai Embassy in China, the Embassy of Japan, the Embassy of Republic of Korea, and the Embassy of the Turkish in China to participate in this event. Okay, thank you for listening, and this is all the content about my part.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for the presentation. Okay, excellent. Okay, so before I open up the floor for the questions, I have a few of my own. The first one, that your title was the digitalization, and then that is very exciting because we all want to learn from China and then also your company. And then one thing that the one participant was also asking the same question that I had, so I will just pick up what he or she is writing, that how the digitalization of food delivery can play a role of food safety. What do you think is the positive impact and potential pitfalls of the digitalization? Over to you. You're muted right now. Thank you for unmuting.
Sorry about that. Yeah. As I mentioned before, we have for food safety equipment solution about food safety equipment. We call it a Keruyun. That machine can guarantee the food when we are ready to deliver this food to your consumer, and this whole process we can guarantee the food safety about that supply chain, that part, because we use that equipment to like a sticker to seal the food after the restaurant give it to our rider. So I think this is very effective way to do this to guarantee food safety in case of our rider or any others to open your food when we delivering. Yes.
Thank you very much. Another challenge that outsiders like me can see is that China itself is a huge country with so many people, and then you have so many businesses, and then of course that your company is doing this excellent job in the digitalization and making sure that the food safety is ensured. But then this is the joint venture, you know. The many companies, many small businesses must have been having an equivalent impact to make sure that the entire food safety system works. So is there any effort from your company side to have some influence or some sort of association kind of work to have a collaboration together with other food businesses? Over to you.
Okay, the most difficult now is what it is. The most difficult now is we trying to do some requirement about the food loss and the waste or the food safety. Even in our country, the policy and the legalization is is processing now, but we face a lot of questions because the food loss and the weight is too difficult to pay attention to, or we can do the who is the responsibility for about this food loss or the waste. We have a whole food supply chain from the country to the factory, and then to the restaurant, and finally during the customer part. So I think this is a very difficult, but we are try our best to do it with a relevant government and the relevant association, and to do a lot of advocates or to announcement, something like that. We can get our customer to a right way to do it. So I think we will try our best to do it about this part. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another question that I have from the floor is that it is about communication. So digitalization have an impact on communication too. So this person is asking, in terms of food safety awareness and trust in food safety authority, how can information and communication technologies can reach the general public from the industry point of view? How the government authority can work with the industry partners to send the proper messages to the general public through digitalization or social media? Over to you.
I think in China, the government has a strong power to all the industry, even Alibaba, and we really need government support about this. But about digitalization, I think the industry pay more attention to it and have a stronger have a stronger power to do it. So, but we cannot separate with the government. We cannot separate with any policy and the legal. So I think we will do it together. Yes, and to use the government power for the authority, and use the technologies skills, something like the Ali Cloud, the database, yeah, and blockchain, something like that. So we do it together. Yeah. It's a difficult question to answer.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So related to it, so you were saying that the government has collaborated with your company to work on this food safety in many different topics. But then how about traceability? That your company itself may have a good traceability systems, and then do you have to be ready to give the answers when the government has a question to you in terms of the traceability? That do you have to trace back as soon as possible, that if government requests? How does this collaboration works? Over to you.
Okay, about the traceability, our platform, our app, Ele.me, is focused on the takeout business. So we pay more attention to the traceability during the when the rider deliver the food to your consumer. This chain, yes, we will pay more attention to, and this is the government has a very obviously and clearly policy and legal about this on the food safety, and we already participate a lot of standard, even the industry standard or the country standard with government together. Yes, to make our industry more and more, better. Yeah, get better.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Now that I would like to invite Mr. David together. Stay on, Hannah, please, for a few more questions, because I would like to ask two of you, Mr. David and Miss Hannah, the same questions, because Mr. David is coming from India, and then also they are knowing all the standard and international harmonization, and then everything about this government side of work too. And then Hannah is very knowledgeable about this quality assurance, and then also the affairs, government compliance affairs, those kind of issues. So my question to both of you is that I will ask Dave first and then Hannah next, but then what do you think is the most important thing when you think about food safety in collaboration with the public-private partnership? So over to you, Mr. Dave. What is the most important thing that we have to consider when we think about private and public partnership on food safety? Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Masami, for this question. uh, the government or the food regulator in any country has the responsibility to lay down policies and legislations, and that has to be implemented by the industry, but at the same time also by the regulator. Now, where is the linkage? The linkage is at the end of the day, the product has to be delivered safe to the consumer. Capacity building in these areas is extremely important. So, like what the Food Safety Authority of India has done very eloquently is to lay down a format of capacity building. They have identified the priority areas and identified how the capacity building will be delivered. In any country, a regulator does not have the kind of manpower that is required to give training to all food business operators, whether they are producers or manufacturers or food delivery people or a retailer or a transporter. So they developed a program to be implemented by the private sector. And in the private sector, what we did was to identify organizations according to a set criteria, identify organizations that should deliver that training. So first of all, it is the registration of the private sector people, the trainers, the train the trainer program was created. So these trainers have been developed to provide further training. So that is where the public-private partnership has played a very important role. And I believe, on the basis of my experience working in India and in other countries, is that this kind of a public-private partnership is extremely important. The focus should be on building capacity to ensure food safety at all levels of the value chain in whichever industry it is. In the high-risk products, a little more effort is required.
Thank you very much, David. The same question to you, Hannah. What do you think is the most important thing to consider when we think about food safety and achieving the goal together with the public and private partnership? Over to you.
Oh yes, I think we don't call it the most important. I think no matter the farmers and the whole supply chain about the food safety, each part is all important, the most important part. And I think our company is focusing on the lastest part about this supply chain, and we all try our best to focusing on the from the agriculture food, from the drive of the food, the country, and we also pay attention to the process and the factory. And I think every part about this food safety supply chain is all the most important. Oh yeah, yes. Okay.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Another question that I have from the floor is that, what is the role of NGO, do you think? So this is the question to both of you, that what do you think that an NGO can have a role in food safety from the industry point of view, Hannah, and then from the public sector point of view, Mr. Dave? So I will go with Hannah first and then second, Dave, please. Hannah?
Oh, yes. You mean NGO is a non-governmental organization, right?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah, the consumer associations and things like that.
the consumer association, okay, and something like others restaurant association, right? And okay, I think we did a lot of cooperation with the non-governmental organizations to do the charity things and something like that. And I think they are very important to the consumer, because they can be a very good supervisor to about the industry and the government, and I think they can get a very strong influence about to guide the consumer to do the right direction. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dave, please.
Thank you. From the government point of view, from the regulator point of view, the role of NGOs is important in various areas. One that we have very much utilized is their participation in the legislation setting process, in the regulatory process. So a few NGOs, non-governmental organizations or not-for-profit organizations, are a part of the FSSAI, the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India board, where the risk management decisions are taken, where the legislation decisions are taken. So the role is to hear, the board needs to hear the views of the NGOs, whether they are consumer organizations or they are industry bodies, not-for-profit organizations, while setting the standard, because whatever standard has to be set should be economically and technically feasible as well, while ensuring the safety of the people and while ensuring trade continues to grow. So this is one role that the NGOs have with the government. The other is in capacity building of the food business operators. Food business operators at different kinds, whether it is the bakery sector, which is the most important sector, which is the biggest sector, or the milk sector, or the meat sector, or the fish sector, or the ready-to-eat products, even restaurants or retailers, fast food joints, their capacity building through a panel of experts. It is where this public-private partnership, it is here that association between the regulator and the not-for-profit organization or an NGO is important. There are some consumer organizations also who provide these training programs. And all these training programs, the entire system has been digitized. I saw one in the chat question, one of the person asked is, how do you need digitization? How do you do authorization? So you got to identify the right people, the experts. So where the NGOs have been identified and registered by FSSAI, they have been evaluated on the basis of their understanding, the knowledge of food safety and food safety best practices. So these two roles we see are very critical. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the great discussions, both Mr. Dave and then also Ms. Hannah. I see some comments from the floor saying that yes, digitalization is very important. It will be a very great tool in the future for ensuring food safety. But at the same time, that just leaving this role alone to the private sector may not be the perfect solution, that we do have to keep this partnership together with the government and then also the private sectors, and then some voices from the consumers, possibly through this non-governmental, non-profit organization, to have proper demands coming from the consumers. And then we can all go into the digitalization, so that the digitalization itself does not go alone with only one sector or similar. So this is the comment that we have been receiving. So it has been excellent, the fruitful discussions, and thank you both of you for the excellent keynote speech. We really enjoyed it, and then there are lots of questions in the Q&A box. So if you could visit, both of you, the Q&A box, and then if you could answer some of the questions that are addressed to you, I would very much appreciate it. And meanwhile, that the conference will break for 10 minutes, but then as usual, that we just don't break, but then we show the very interesting videos. Today's lineup is that one video coming from China, the High Level Authority of China, and then the next video is from Lao PDR. So with the video that will break for 10 minutes, and then we will see all of you in 10 minutes. Thank you so much, and then stay online and see you later.
食品安全对中国的重要性，中国有句俗话叫“民以食为天，食以安为先”。食品安全事关广大人民群众的身体健康和生命安全，事关国家的健康发展和社会的和谐稳定。中国政府高度重视食品安全工作。习近平主席指出，能不能在食品安全上给老百姓一个满意的交代，是对国家自身能力的重大考验。食品安全源头在农产品，基础在农业，要用再严谨的标准，再严格的监管，再严厉的处罚，再严肃的问责，确保广大人民群众舌尖上的安全。中国各级政府积极采取有效措施，从政策、资金、人才等方面为食品安全工作提供保障。中国在食品安全领域取得了巨大成就。食品安全对中国而言还是新兴领域。中国农业农村部开展食品安全工作也就20多年的历史，时间不长，但进展是全方位的。一是强化监管体系建设，农业农村部门建立了从中央到省、市、县以至于镇村的食品安全监管网络，监管人员近20万人。二是强化法律制度与标准体系的建设，颁布了以食品安全法、农产品质量监管法为核心的10几部食品安全相关法律法规，制定农药残留、兽药残留限量及检测方法标准10068项，90%以上的农兽药残留限量值高于或等于国际食品法典的标准。三是强化绿色生产，实施农药化肥减量增效行动，大力发展绿色食品、有机农产品和地理标志农产品，扶正企业总数达到2.1万家。四是次数针对突出问题开展食品安全专项整治，严厉打击各类违规违法行为。中国食品质量安全保持稳中向好态势，连续多年食品安全监测总体合格率稳定在97.5%以上，也没有发生重大的食品安全或农产品质量安全事件。中国在食品安全领域与 FAO 的合作情况。中国政府高度重视与 FAO 的合作。上世纪70年代到90年代，在 FAO 的帮助下，中国成功解决了人民群众的温饱问题，提前达到联合国的1000年发展目标。本世纪以来，中国政府又非常重视与 FAO 在食品安全领域的合作，全面推动中国食品安全水平的提升，尤其是在标准制定方面。自2007年以来，一直担任 CEC 的农药残留、食品添加剂的 2个全运会的主持国，为推动 CAC 相关标准制定做出了积极贡献。下一步呢，中国政府还期待进一步深化与 FAO 在食品安全领域的合作，重点在标准制定、监管能力提升、食品安全风险评估和信息交流等方面加强合作，助力 FAO 在食品安全国际多边合作中发挥更大的作用。
Food safety is one of the main priority of Lao PDR as the production system are evolving since the country economic reform in the 1980s. As you may know, Lao PDR is predominantly an agriculture country. The majority of farmers and smallholders who follow traditional farming practice which are organic by default. However, it is gradually changing with increasing demand as well as opening of new markets. Food safety has been in focus in the country for the last 2 decades. We have introduced the concept of sustainable green and green production system at all levels. This focus on introduction of organic agriculture following good agriculture practice, pesticide-free production and integrated pest management. Our government have introduced a number of law and policy framework for food safety. This includes the 2004 Law on Food, Law on Consumer Production, and the 1998 Law on Agriculture. The main policy framework include the following: the 2019 National Green Growth Strategy, the 2016 Strategy Plan for National Organic Agriculture Development, as well as the National Socioeconomic Development Plan. We have law and policy in place for food safety, yet we also need FAO help in translating them into action. We need support in capacity building for farmers to implement safe food production system as well as of the government officials to enforce this standard. In the past few years, the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, with active support from FAO, has developed and enacted a pesticide decree. We are promoting the concept of green rice landscape. This is not only for food safety but also the conservation around the agrobiodiversity of the rice field. Together, FAO and Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry have developed the Green and Sustainable Agriculture Strategic Framework and the Green Agriculture Strategic Program. We have worked on integrated pest management that have made significant contribution to food safety in recent years. As efforts to ensure food safety in the Lao PDR continue to improve, we look forward to FAO continued support.
Hello, everyone. Again, wish you all again a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for staying with us and enjoying the break. And we hope you're all refreshed now to go into the next round of very interesting speakers. Before we go to the next round, let us first thank our two keynote speakers for the day, Mr. Sanjay Dave and Hannah Zhang, for their excellent presentations, for really putting into perspective the issues that are there in the Asian Pacific, some of the prerequisites that we need to implement, especially in industry, across the supply chains, important and importantly for trade. Trade is the big driver in this region. And if this region is the economic engine of the world, it is because of trade. So we need to keep that in mind whenever we think of food safety. So to progress further on that topic and to talk more about issues which are very closely linked to trade, which are standards, we will now have a very interesting panel discussion. And this session is dedicated to our countries and our member countries in the Pacific Islands. We have 15 member countries of the FAO in the Pacific Islands, and they are all actively involved in the work, the regional work that we do on food safety. And we really thank them for participating and for being here today. So before that, I'll just introduce the moderator of this session. So the moderator is Miss Jiang Yi Fan, who is the head of science and regulatory affairs at Food Industry Asia in Singapore. She is well known almost all across Asia, particularly because of the work that she does for the Food Industry Asia, which is essentially a trade association. She has worked earlier with a global regulatory consulting firm as a regulatory affairs advisor, where she has helped clients with regulatory support to market food and health supplements in Asian countries. And she has also been an advisor to the International Alliance of Dietary and Food Supplement Association. So she will be moderating the discussion. But let me first introduce two very special guests who are joining us all across from the Pacific Islands. First, we have Dr. Vilyami Manu, who is the Deputy Director for Research and Extension in the Ministry of Agriculture, Food, Forests, and Fisheries in Tonga. He has had a very prominent career as the Codex contact point for Tonga and the national Codex contact for the FAO modified platform. He's been a dedicated national pesticide registrar with extensive experience in managing and providing statistics, advice, and training on pesticide safety in Tonga. So this is a very important area. And as we can see, Dr. Manu comes with us with a very strong background across some of the key issues that are important for trade and standards. The other distinguished panelist that we've got today is Mr. Pulotu Lyndon Chuling, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Labor from Samoa. Mr. Chuling spearheads the Samoa Codex Committee through the development of food standards and related work, as well as the National Tripartite Forum involving in integrating initiatives that promote a just transition and climate change, especially during climate change in Samoa through employment. Both of them represent countries who have this year received grants from the Codex Trust Fund to enhance their capacity building activities in their respective countries. And we look forward to working with them. But at this point, I'll hand it over to Yifan to start the discussion. Over to you, Yifan. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Shrida, for the kind introduction. And before we go into the session, may I also kindly request Mr. Puluto to turn on your video and audio as well, so that we can start the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Puluto. Yeah. And first of all, I'm very pleased to have the chance to join the discussion today with two very distinguished guests, Dr. Manu and Mr. Puluto, to have the discussion around food safety in the Pacific Islands. So first of all, I think that I must say you guys come from very beautiful islands in the Pacific region. And as for myself, I'm based in Singapore. It's also a very small country. And I know that the challenge of the small countries is that we can't produce every food in our countries. So my question, first question to both of you is that as countries that is heavily dependent on food imports, how are your countries in addressing this in terms of the food control at the borders? And in this case, how do Codex standards also help in your countries? So may I turn this question first to Dr. Manu first, and then I will go to Mr. Pluto. But feel free to chip in and build on each other's discussions later on. Okay. So first, Dr. Manu, please. I'm sorry, Dr. Manu, we're not able to hear you. Yeah. No, we still can't hear you. Could you try maybe adjust your audio system? Or is there any issue with your earpiece? Probably you can plug it out and try again.
Gives me to chip in. Mr. Viliami, hello. Can you try to mouse over the screen, and then you will see the icon of the microphone on the bottom left, and then there is a little arrow there. And then if you could click on the little arrow and then try to select your microphone, the proper microphone to be the system one. Could you try to do that? And no, still we cannot hear you. Can you try changing the microphone source? Thank you very much. No, we cannot hear you. So perhaps that, okay, let's try to figure out. And then meanwhile that, sorry that Ifan, that perhaps that we can start from Mr. Poloto first. And then meanwhile that we will figure out with Mr. Viliami. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Madam Moderator, Excellencies, distinguished delegates and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Talofalawa and greetings from Samoa. Good evening. It's about 6 p.m. now in Samoa, roughly around the same time in Tonga. But it's an honor to be part of this panel. And in responding to the issue that has been raised by Madam Moderator, I'm happy to confirm that Samoa now has a Food Safety Act 2015, as well as a Food Safety and Quality Regulation 2017, which is provides the mandate and the authority for the relevant government agencies, such as the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Customs and Revenue, as well as the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, and the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Labor to work collaboratively in terms of ensuring that the food items and all the imported stuff that comes into the country are monitored and checked in terms of the quality standards, as well as all the other documentation, standard documentation that is required for the importation of food items. An important part of that legislation is provided in Section 11, which says that, and I want to quote it, to emphasize that food safety and quality is very important to us, like all other member countries. And I've heard just a few minutes ago the very interesting presentation from Dr. Dave Sanjay. And just to quote that section of our legislation, it spells out, it says that a person must not import any food unless the food has been produced or manufactured in accordance with prescribed standards, and has been produced or manufactured in accordance with prescribed standards and is accompanied by the prescribed documents and has been inspected by the relevant government ministry or agency at the port of entry. So, Madam Coordinator, in saying that, I'm happy to share with you that, as I say, that these are the key government agencies or ministries, as we know it, that works together at the border, both at the airports as well as at the wharf, to monitor the inflow and outflow of goods that comes into the country, as well as the exports, our exports to the overseas markets. So, in addition to that, we have also, over the years, under the legislation, the Codex legislation standards, we have developed and enforced a number of national standards. And I would like to name a few for your reference. We have developed a standard for eggs, because we also import eggs, although we promote national production, but because of the capacity to sustain enough supply for the local market, we also still allow importation of eggs. So we have developed a standard for eggs, as well as a standard for kava. I'm sure our forum is familiar with kava, which is a very important traditional and healthy health drink in the Pacific, especially from Samoa. I know my colleague from Tonga will claim that he's the one who owns the kava, but I say that it's a very important traditional drink in all of the Pacific Island countries. And so we have also developed and launched a standard for kava, as well as cocoa, because it's one of our exports as well. And it's also a very popular fruit here in Samoa, in which we make something similar to the cocoa chocolates that you make in your respective countries. So we have also developed and approved a standard for cocoa, as well as sugar, cereal, and cereal products, and as well as fish and fish-related products. So we have developed a number of standards, and we are continuing to pursue the development of more standards, which is much dependent on the interest from our industries, as well as the response and the of the demand from our consumers. But we, as a Codex Committee, we continue to pursue and to identify new standards that need to be developed as we progress, and also to bring into play the important role of our development partners to assist us in this effort, because this is one of the challenges that we face as a country, and I'm sure it's similar to any other small developing country, of the need for resources to assist us in these efforts. In saying that, I would like to also confirm that I would like to vouch my support for the issues that, as I raised earlier, that were raised by Dr. Sanjay Dave, and especially on the section on the things that needs to be focused on. I must admit that we are doing all these things, but the challenge that remains to be addressed, and it's an eye-opener from this forum today for us in Samoa, is the need for us to effectively implement all of this, because we have them, we are doing them, but we need to enforce and to strengthen ourselves in terms of building our capacity, especially in the capacity building aspect of it. The capacity of our technical staff at the borders for consistent enforcement and inspection of goods, especially food items that comes into the country. And as a National Codex Committee, we want also to make sure that we will continue to play that role in trying to bring everybody into play, into organizing ourselves collaboratively for the main objective of ensuring that the food that is provided to our consumers is safe and healthy. I'd just like to stop there, but thank you for those are my introductory remarks on that issue. Thank you so much. Whawhetai o whātu.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pluto. Those are great points. And how about Dr. Manu? Have you been able to resolve your audio problem? Can we try again? Hi, Dr. Manu. No, we still can't hear you. I'm so sorry for that. Yeah. Maybe you can try sign out and sign in again, and later we can address it back to you again. Is it okay? Yeah, thank you so much. And yes, so thanks, Mr. Pluto, for the great points that you have mentioned about, and also sharing with us on the how Samoa has been working on to establish the national standards on various aspects by utilizing Codex as a very important platform, and also the important point that you have mentioned about the key to help implement these standards, and the role of capacity building will be very important for your country in this case. So now I'd like to ask a question to have a little bit of deep dive into the food safety situations in your countries. So you are also aware that in the year 2015, that the WHO has issued a report estimating on the global burden of foodborne diseases. And in this report, it has shown that the presence of parasites are the primary food safety issue in the Pacific region. And my question is, what are the steps that are being taken to increase the awareness of the practices that could help prevent the entry of these parasites into the food chain in your countries?
Thank you very much. I fully agree with the outcome of that report, and also the reference to the parasites and the need for us to make it a priority as a country, to ensure that there is increased awareness to the public, especially the consumers, on the importance of having that understanding of the need to know that there are certain signs to show that a product is not good or not healthy for consumption. But I would like to state that one of the strong initiatives that the government of Samoa has taken in regards to increasing the awareness is the enforcement of the role of the Scientific Research Organization of Samoa, which has been established. And one of their key functions, amongst others, is to assist the country and the government and all other agencies in testing different products. So it works in a very coordinated manner, in which sometimes the inquiry comes to our ministry, and then for example, I know that recently we have received some queries from some of the consumers in regards to some very bad clean fish. So we have said, so instead of them going to the Scientific Research Organization, they came through us. So we facilitated the transfer of that inquiry to the research organization, and they assist us in making the test and to provide that. And in coming to that, Madam Moderator, we have provided very strong awareness of the availability of these services here in Samoa. Similarly, there is ongoing campaign through the Ministry of Health, utilizing the media, the website, as well as social media, in terms of providing awareness to a wider scope of consumers and also to the communities, because that is one advantage. The Alipapa presentation is very interesting as well by Hannah, in which she emphasized the importance of communication. And we see that instead of looking at social media from a negative perspective, it's one of the most important mode of communication now here in Samoa, as majority of the people in the rural areas, communities, are now having access to mobile phones. So Ministry of Health, in terms of those health campaigns, in terms of healthy food, risks and all that in terms relating to food, and also in partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture, are all utilizing the media to promote these opportunities. And one of the things that has come up, one of the outcome of the state of emergency because of COVID-19 is here in Samoa, the government has emphasized a very strong campaign that promotes the farming for subsistence, because there is now very strong dependency on buying the fresh produce from the fresh market, especially for us workers. But since the lockdown, there was a very strong campaign through all these four ministries, as I mentioned earlier, and especially spearheaded by the Ministry of Agriculture in Samoa and Quarantine, to encourage the people of Samoa to go back to farm on a part-time basis. So I'm happy to report that as of last month, there has been a lot of excitement here in Apia in Samoa, because most of those crops, and some of the families have gone twice, 3 times now harvesting their small patches of cabbages, tomatoes, and all those food items. But all through awareness programs that either came through the form of media or through the special programs utilizing the existing television, because we have more than 2-3 televisions here in this very small country of Samoa, and the radios as well. So we have been very, I'm proud to say that we have been very active in terms of providing the awareness. And also through the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Labor, they provide ongoing awareness on the radio and television, encouraging consumers to report to the ministries if they have problems with food items that are sold in any shop. So I say that this is one of the core functions of that ministry, is to look after the inquiries from the consumers. And in the pipeline, we are also making preparations for the establishment of a consumer council here in Samoa. You know, that will address all matters that would be of interest to the consumers. Because at the moment, we only have employers, businesses, government, and NGOs and that. But there has been some interest and feedback from the community over the past years of the need to revive a strong consumer organization. So that work is now in the pipeline, but it all comes back to the importance of having that awareness, building that awareness and confidence in the minds of the people, consumers, that they have a right. We promote consumer rights. The word consumer rights, we commemorate World Consumer Rights every year. That's in March, eh? In March of every year, we celebrate World Consumer Rights Day. And part of that campaign is through awareness programs that we provide to the communities. We do road shows to go around the islands, and to road shows on providing that awareness to consumers of their rights and the importance of having good food. And we do it in partnership with the Ministry of Health. We invite their senior representatives, as well as the Ministry of Customs, Quarantine, because we all have a very common role in terms of having this. So we have these annual awareness programs, as well as individual programs that comes into play, with the ultimate objective of ensuring that the information is well communicated to the members of the community. And one last point I want to make in regards to the awareness, we also utilize the village councils every village in Samoa, there's about more than almost 300 villages. Every village has a village council. The village council comprised of chiefs, and they are the ones who they develop village bylaws, in which contains the bylaws sort of outline the health requirements that the village members should be should abide to, and also the economic side of things, the social issues, and all that. And once that bylaw has been consulted at each village, it comes to our Ministry of Women and Social Community Development. And so we also utilize that the village council, because it's very effective. You know, they have a mayor, a village mayor, and they have chiefs in the council, and they are the ones who does the enforcement, and they work collaboratively with government ministries and that. And we, every time we go out for an awareness on any specific issue, we always step through the village council, because they are the ones who will organize their members to come and attend the awareness programs that we conduct on a joint basis. And I also emphasize the PP, private-public partnership, as also was mentioned by Dr. Tavi. Very important here as well, despite our smallness in size, but it's very effective when we work together with the other ministries and also the community, and not to do it on a lonely approach, one basis. So that was my last point on that awareness, and we continue to do the awareness despite the COVID-19. And since the lockdown for us since May, we have developed more our a special Facebook for the ministry, and we use that to release information to the public. And similarly, the other ministries are doing the same approach for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Puluto, and having a very comprehensive answer for us in terms of how do we address building the consumers' education and awareness on food safety issues. Those are very useful points for us to hear. And I also really appreciate the points that you mentioned about using multiple channels, including not only traditional media, but also social media, consumer organization, and also the village councils in order to reach out to the community and the consumers. And I personally also believe that food safety is a shared responsibility. We have to really enable and empower the various sectors, including government, industry, and consumers to have their roles and responsibilities in food safety. And really government's leadership is very important in this journey as well. So now let me.
May I come in? I think we are trying to have a semi-analog way to solve the situation, and then now we are connected with the Mr. William to the phone, and then we will try to have the audio from our microphone so that the hopefully that people can hear us. So over to you.
Great. Hi, Dr. Manu. Let's try if we can hear you now.
Plus one.
So unless we have form a local standard, all the code standards is legislative or the legal standard for food processing, import, or food safety. At all costs, the labeling standard is the foremost standard the label for origin, for tag date, etc., etc. And we have a list, high-risk food, and then go through an extra testing routine relative to the normal supply. So that's what we have at home. For the second question, the Food Act on only allows us to work on commercial food for sale. So in order to have a national food safety, we have to combine with the Ministry of Health in order to advise food safety on consuming of local food, domesticated or festivities, like in ceremonies, etc. On the project, as part of Samoa, we are making an awareness for the project and projects. Similarly, because in our food, all town officers are authorized as inspectors. So they go through the same process right down to schools, raising every bit of important issues with regard to food safety. In Singapore, we have a huge food import relative to our export. So we are experiencing the fact that some of the food that we are consuming is not safe, because previously we always followed that food coming from developed countries are always superior in terms of nutrition and safety. But lately, in our improved food safety system, we realized that some of the food products are not safe. And in cooperation with Infosan and Food Safety Australia New Zealand, SPC, of course, it's our partners in informing us on some of the food safety emergency. And the last warning from Infosan was in August 2020, with regards from first speeches from the USA, which was contaminated with salmonella. So that's where Tonga is in terms of food safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manu, for sharing with us on the points, and also great to hear that your country is collaborating with international organizations like Infosan, and also getting support from the other countries to help to build food safety in your countries. And also I heard that in the first point, you also mentioned about the importance of placing the standardization in terms of food labeling to support import and export and food trade. And if I may come from food private sector's perspective, I think the food labeling is indeed probably the most difficult standard that industry face when it comes to international food trade as well. So thank you for mentioning that. And now, please let me go into the next question to both of you. So earlier, we have heard from Dr. Sri that mentioned that both Tonga and Samoa have also recently received funding from the Codex Trust Fund starting from this year. So may I know what are the key outcomes that you're aiming for through these funding support from Codex, and how you are going to implement these into the projects in your countries? Shall we start from Mr. Bluto first? I'm sorry, Mr. Bluto, please unmute yourself first. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. With the consent of my colleague, Dr. Manu, I will start this section again, but one of the issues that I did not mention earlier under the mandate of our Food Safety Act is that we have experienced food recall. So all goods that were imported into Samoa in the past years that did not meet healthy standards, we were able to recall them through the Ministry of Health. So these goods were destroyed in partnership with the importers. But in terms of the Codex Trust Fund, it was an amazing experience for us in the preparation of our application, because that was our second attempt. And now we have received approval for the trust fund. And it's an amazing experience because we were able to consult and also to bring all the stakeholders together and to provide training as well as consultation on the Codex diagnostic tool, which was a very important tool that assists countries when they want to apply for a trust fund. So there is a very big list, Madam Coordinator, of things that we already have in our action plan for the utilization proper of the trust fund that we will be receiving soon. But I just want to provide, in overall, we will utilize the fund to strengthen the functioning of the national Codex structures and support the participation of Codex members at technical forums and more capacity building, as well as the increasing the capacity of all stakeholders, all players in the industries, the food industry and the related industries, to actively engage in the development and implementation of national food standards, which should be aligned to international Codex food standards. And lastly, to develop scientific and technical capacity for food safety risk analysis. So more on capacity building, and also to make sure that all the different players will be accounted for in these developments, because it will not be effective when we just work in isolation as a Codex committee without the involvement of all the key players that needs to have that understanding, as I mentioned earlier. Consumers, industries, private sector organizations, government, and all the different organizations needs to come together. So we have that. So I'm just providing an overview of what we will utilize the fund for, amongst all the other small activities that we already have in our action plan for utilization of the trust fund. And I just want to acknowledge the support of FAO and WHO in our efforts when we were trying to apply, because it's a very technical process. And I want to acknowledge at this point in time the support that we have received from technical assistance from FAO and WHO, which has made it possible for Samoa to carry out these consultations and also the trainings on the Codex diagnostic tool, and also for us to put together this application, which was now approved, which has now been approved. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Pluto. You can call me Ifan. Yeah, feel free to do that. And thank you very much for sharing with us on how you are going to implement the funding to help to strengthen the Codex national structure in your countries, and also the important point you have mentioned about the key in terms of collaboration from multiple sectors and stakeholders, and as well as in an international space. Yeah. So how about you, Dr. Manu? Do you have any like similar programs, or is there anything like different in your country in terms of utilizing this fund to implement into projects?
Thank you. In essence, we are very similar to Samoa. We got a food system, and it's very closely held. Here is government. There is the food businesses, food importers, and consumers. So there's a very loose linkages between them. So what we would like to do with this project is to strengthen these linkages, bring them closer to each other, so that they have to understand that what we are doing is for safety of us all. It's not, we have to do this. The government has to do this. We have the legislation. And because we consume a huge amount of imported food, that is being prepared and grown and produced in the country. We don't see only the information on the label. So in order to raise awareness, the importance of all that information coming in the label, and the trust they are being produced according to the Codex standard, and that's where the standard is like a safety measures for us. So that's our main target, is to establish and strengthen the current food safety system that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manu, and also sharing some additional points about how to support the implementation of the various standards in your countries. Those are really helpful information. And here comes my next question. So we know that food standards are the key elements to achieve effective food trade. Yeah. But as to your countries, besides food trade, what are the other drivers that are also leading to your country's implementation of the food standards? Could you share some insights with us? Let's start from Dr. Manu again.
Well, there are some instances of food, mostly from the street foods, because some of the meat products are not fully cooked, and somehow they are not safe. So we have a lot of incidents where people were being taken in a group, either in a funeral or in some ceremonies, because of some food emergencies that we have. So people are starting to be aware of the importance of food safety. So these local incidences bringing to light of what we're trying to pursue, other than the compliances to the food export and import requirements. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Manu, for sharing with us on the food safety challenges that you face at the local level, especially in terms of street food. Yeah, I think that this is also similar challenges that are being faced by several other developing countries as well. Yeah, how about you, Mr. Pluto? Do you have any other insights that you would like to share with us?
I think the challenges raised by Dr. Manu are also similar to us. And I just wanted to add that, as I mentioned earlier, but still a very important point when we come to these drivers of food trade, is the need to build the capacity of our technical people. Because we have a very limited supply of technical people in the different mandates. And we need to make sure that we have ongoing programs that will ensure that the capacity of the succession of different staff will be improved as we move along. But it also brings me to the point that the key drivers that will allow us to know, as government agencies and as a committee of national codex committees, we rely very much on the participation of our stakeholders. The private sector, they are the drivers of standards. Why? Because they are the ones who makes the goods. They are the producers. And in order for them to succeed, to be successful in the market, they have to provide quality food, not only at the national level, but also at the export level, at the overseas markets. So they need to bring and identify products that meet standards. A classic example that Samoa has experienced over the past 5 years was the development of HACCP. And I think up to now, if my team will correct me later on, about more than 40 local manufacturers are now HACCP compliant. But one of the challenges that they face is the annual update of for HACCP, they have to do an annual check and assessment of their status. So now they are HACCP compliant, but every year they need to secure some funds so that they can do their check whether they are still compliant and to move on. So private sector is very important. They need to drive that, because they are the innovators. They need to say to government and all the agencies, we need you to develop these standards and all that. And then come consumers. Consumers, as I also mentioned earlier, they are the users of the food and the good items. They have to provide that feedback. These are the issues, the concerns that we have. The labeling of products are not good. We don't understand the language. It's either in Samoan or in English. But our experience tells us that we have some products that with a very foreign language that we cannot understand the content of products. But it's something that now we are working hard as a committee to make sure that importers are reminded of the importance of ensuring that the packaging, the labeling is either in Samoan language or in English, but not in a foreign language that nobody can understand. So these are the things that I think consumers comes into play and very important driver in terms of ensuring that the committee and the agencies will provide the right services for them in terms of standards and food safety. And then government, I mentioned key government agencies, they have to be effective in the implementation of one of the challenges that we don't want to follow is the developing of all these standards that I have listed to you earlier on, just for the purpose of having standards. But what we really want to see as a committee is to develop all these standards, develop more, and then to implement them effectively. Why? Because the life of the consumers is very much dependent on the work that we do as a National Codex Committee to ensure that the standard of the food is healthy and will not create more diseases than that. So government, through the different ministries, has to be very active, and I'm very proud to say that there is very strong political will from our leaders in supporting the work that we do as a Codex Committee. They have given us the trust that we will go out and make sure that we identify all the right processes so that the consumers and our people, the players, all the key players, private sector, would have something that they can follow and can use for not only to make profits as a private sector, but also to be satisfied when you consume goods that are made here locally or imported. And then we have the National Codex Committee. We need to be strong and consistent in the things that we do. As chairman of that committee, I am happy to say that at the moment we are doing okay. But I know that there is still plenty of room for us to move forward and also to take advantage of the information that we are gathering from this forum and how we can utilize this information for the improvement of our services for the benefit of our stakeholders. So in saying that, I think those are some of the key drivers in terms of organizations and partners that we need to. And we want to also to continue to encourage development partners to consider the capacity of us here in the Pacific Island countries, and to consider some of the projects that we are proposing, and we are only asking for support because we know that we don't have the capacity to carry them out. So thank you very much, Ms.
Thank you, Mr. Puloto. Those are excellent points. And I really like the points you have shared about the role of standards in helping the business to grow and also protecting food safety and protecting the consumers. And you also make a great point about the private sector being the driver also to lead the development of the standards and upgrade the industry, and also how the government is also creating this kind of environment to empower the private sector to upgrade on their systems. And also I think sometimes standards can come from government, but it can also come from the private sector. We also have private standards available around the world in various countries as well. So I think that the key is that how do we work collaboratively between the public and the private sector to enable a system whereby we have the standards to support food safety and industry growth. So sometimes the government may not need to create every single standard, and we can't just create standard for the sake of creating it. So sometimes less could be more as well. We can also equally have an effective control system. That's really great point. And another point you have mentioned is also about how do we enhance capacity building to support the implementation of the standard. So now it also leads me to the next part of our discussion, which is also the last part I would like to bring up, which is about international and regional collaboration and capacity building. So may I get your thoughts on how is your collaboration with the regional bodies in the Pacific region in terms of food safety, and does it play a role in enhancing food control through the partnership with the Pacific region and countries such as Australia and New Zealand? So shall we start from Dr. Manu first?
Thank you. The Coordinating Committee for North America and Southwest Pacific. The coordinator started with Samoa in 2007, and Tonga in 2009, and then Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea, and then I think currently Vanuatu, and it's going to be. I mean, before, talking about Tonga, we were very, very low in terms of food safety system, legislation, etc. But as we time become active in the Coordinating Committee for North America and Southwest Pacific, everything was improved. We have to move up to that level. So that was a big factor in upgrading all the food safety system in the Pacific. But still to our involvement in this CC Network Committee. And then we link on to SDC, Infosan, Food Safety Australia and New Zealand, and then USA for things like food recall, food products, and there were trainings. We were attached also in our partners' country, Australia and New Zealand. So that's how we were greatly improved up to this stage. Was still our involvement with these committees. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Manu, for sharing with us the collaboration programs that you have with various countries from the region and from the world, and the kind of trainings that are also available in the countries. And how about you, Mr. Pluto? Could you share with us as well on what are the programs that you also have in terms of regional or international collaboration, and what kind have it been effective, and what kind of result it has also bring into your country?
Well, first of all, I would like to I fully agree with the comments raised by my colleague Manu, and I think we have similar benefits through meeting and training participation in the past years. Under the CC SNAP committee. and also in acknowledging the Quad members of that committee, and also my colleagues in the Pacific region who have been actively participating. And that shows how strong the emphasis has been placed on food safety and standards by the Pacific region through the work, and as my colleague has alluded to in terms of the chairmanship of that committee, which started in 2007 onwards, and it's still moving at the moment. And I also want to acknowledge I still want to acknowledge the work that we do together with FAO and WHO in terms of developing these standards. As I mentioned, the technical assistance for assisting us in pulling together our Codex Trust Fund application, and also the indirect work. When I say indirect, it's not through my ministry, but through the Ministry of Health here in Samoa, the Ministry of Agriculture that works in close collaboration with SBC in Fiji, and also the FAO and WTO in terms of our Ministry of Health and our Ministry of Agriculture, in all the different developments that are all indirectly linked to food, either food security or food safety, but it's still under the food category. So I'm happy to say that there is very strong collaboration here in Samoa with all these development partners and organizations, and we do appreciate the support that we are receiving from them, and also the consultation that we have, the consultative approach that we have with them, with everything that we throw in the pipeline as a priority to us. We go through a consultative process with the organizations in ensure that we understand how to go through the different processes for us to reach the intended outcome. So very effective and very strong partnership with all these organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Buluto, for your inputs, and I'm very happy to hear that both of your countries received quite a lot of support from outside of your countries, and has also helped to brought quite a lot of outcomes and results to help to enhance food safety in your countries. So that will end my session and the conversation with both of you. And thank you very much, audience, for bearing with us. I hope you have something to learn from this session, and apologize again for the small technical issue that we have encountered earlier. Thank you very much. And now, please let me pass it back to Dr. Shrida to help us to go through the question and answer session.
Thank you, Ifan. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ifan. And I'll request Dr. Mano and Dr. Chuling, please stay on the line. Well, thank you, Ifan, first of all, for for moderating this so well, and for bringing about some of the key issues in the Pacific. These are very important for all of us to learn as we progress in our work. And definitely, as you see, the issue of imported food control, of trade, and then as well as management of the local domestic food and street food are all issues that we need to concern ourselves with. And we look forward to working with both Samoa, Tonga on the Codex Trust Fund grants and move forward. So at this point, I'd like to bring in Dr. Dave. Mr. Dave, you're obviously been the chair of the Codex Commission. You have seen a lot of these issues. So for our colleagues in the Pacific, are there any specific advice that you would like to give on key things that they should be focusing on, so that given that they are small countries and they all actually have to act together rather than being smaller islands in themselves? So over to you, Mr. Dave.
Well, thank you, Sridhar. Basically, what is important is a collaborative work. The small islands are there, so it is a good idea to collaborate and find common grounds for enhancing food safety and enhancing regional trade, apart from focusing on other countries as well. It's very important to ensure that all the stakeholders, whether they are in the private sector or in the public sector or the ministries or the regulator or the NGOs, they work towards a common goal to see that food safety can be ensured. Alignment with the codex, bringing in surveillance programs, food safety education are some of the important things that will continue to be important. It might also be a good idea for some of these countries to create a program and make proposal either to the Codex Trust Fund or to the Standards and Trade Development Facility of the WTO, STDF, where a lot of capacity building programs are funded. That I think would be a key take home from what I am trying to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dave. So since you did mention the STDF, and that has been an important body in terms of increasing both the level of awareness and practice, particularly on SPS measures across supply chains. And we do have at this point one STDF project in the Solomon Islands, and we have definitely seen interest from Samoa and Tonga on actually going into to actually apply to STDF. So again, are there any words of advice that you would give to them on some of the key areas that they could focus when they're interested in STDF grants? Over to you.
Yes, yes. A couple of things that can be done is, one is there is a plan by STDF to organize a awareness program about the STDF programs. They've done one in Asia, one in Africa, and I'm sure there is a plan for the Southwest Pacific as well. There is another thing that there is a tool called Prioritizing Investments for Market Access, PIMA, P-I-M-A. Prioritizing investments in market access, for market access, is a tool which if the countries can use, they will be able to identify the priority areas where capacity building is required. So that can be a good starting point, and from there a program for capacity building support from the STDF can be developed. What I can do is to send an email to Melvin in the STDF and suggest that a program for the Southwest Pacific countries should be initiated. And I think there are some members from the Southwest Pacific that are developing country experts into the STDF, and they can be good ambassadors for that. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Dave. I'm sure that our colleagues in the Pacific, both Dr. Manu and Mr. Chuling, as well as those who are listening, will find that very useful. So at this point, Dr. Dave, I know you have another engagement, so I'd really like to thank you for being here and for staying throughout and giving us all very good advice. So I'm sure this will be very valuable. And I know all you've been interacting a lot with the audience on the chat. So I mean, audience, let's just say that you're free to keep in touch with Mr. Dave anytime you want more information. You can find him very easily. Just Google him and you'll find him. So at this point, I'll thank you again, Mr. Dave, and have a very good day. So
my pleasure, and thank you very much for the kind invitation. Thank you. Thank you all.
I'll request the other panelists to stay online. So Mr. Chuling, a question for you, which we picked from the chat, is what are the activities you aim to implement through the Codex Trust Fund?
I thank you very much. I did mention that we want to ensure that we will strengthen the Codex framework, and also to provide capacity building opportunities on the technical aspect of food standards for the stakeholders, all the stakeholders. Those are some of the key ones that we will utilize the trust fund with.
And Dr. Manu, over to you on the same question. What are some of the key things you would like to achieve through the Codex Trust Fund?
Well, as I've explained before, we have a food safety system, a so-called food safety system. From the ministry, we think it's okay, but overall, nationally, we need to bring up consumers, food businesses, food exporters, food importers to the same level. So that's what we are looking for, is to bring in these other sectors so that we have a very effective and operational food system in terms of food safety over in the country.
Okay, I have a questions to both of you. That the first, Mr. Poloto, that in the Pacific that I have visited a few times, and then in the Pacific, that, I see that trade has been quite limited in the past. That you have products from Australia and New Zealand, but then now that it is changing, that I see that some products coming from China, Thailand, different areas of the globe. Do you see that trend is changing? And then do you see the needs of additional food safety measures, or like the same measures can still continue? Over to you, Mr. Pluto.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting question. I think if we continue to experience the expansion of receiving goods from other markets, the National Codex Committee's work becomes still very important, and we need to ensure that we will have the capacity to match that increase in that changing trend, which I agree with you. So we need more work once we get that type of trend to ensure that the food is safe.
Yes, the same question to you, William, please.
When we start opening up the market to Asia, and it was fine, but because we got all the food standards, so that all the foods coming in has to comply with similarly to that from New Zealand and Australia. Our only last challenge was the food that might be a vector for the African swine fever. So the pork food products were restricted. In the last 6 months, I think. That's the only issue that we had with food from Asia. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you. So basically that you see the trend changing, and then you see some positives and then possible concerns, and then you will really try to implement something that is secure the situation. Is that correct? So now that I would like to invite Ifan. Is Ifan online? Can you turn on your video, please, so that we can include you in the discussions? And then over to you, Sridhar.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Manu and Dr. Chuling again. So Ifan, you represent food industry in Asia. So could you tell us and tell our audience about your organization, the work it does, and particularly talk about the issues related to standards and how the private sector is looking at them and looking to implement them in their business. Over to you, Ifan.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Frida, for the question. And just a brief introduction about my organization, which is Food Industry Asia. It's an industry association that is focusing on the entire Asia Pacific region. And we're based in Singapore, but our coverage is really on the regional level. So in FIA, we work very closely with our industry partners and as well as government organizations in the space of strengthening and developing standards by providing industries comments and expertise in standard setting. So for example, we also actively participate in the Codex Alimentarius Commission as an industry observer, and we actively provide the industry comments in setting Codex international standards in various aspects. And at the same time, by working with our industry partners in various countries, together with the development partners like FAO and the World Bank and other organizations, we also collaborate in capacity building programs through multilateral partnership to help the developing countries to develop their own national food control system, strengthen their standard setting, and enhance the laboratory testing capacity. So these are some of the works that we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you're also one of the organizations, right, that has tried very strongly to link food safety and nutrition. So, and in those areas, so I mean, that would be something of very useful also for our colleagues in the Pacific, because nutrition is an issue that they also grapple with on a regular basis. So what would you, can you describe some of the work of your organization in this?
Yeah, thank you, Shrida, for that question in relation to addressing the challenges around nutrition. So we recognize that around the world and also in particular in Asia region, we are facing enormous challenge in the challenge about the double burden of malnutrition and obesity in our region. So as a food industry organization, we also try to collaborate very closely with the various stakeholders, including the nutrition community, nutrition society, academic organizations, and the governments to actually create programs that will help us to reach out to the consumers in terms of nutrition education and community reach out programs. So for example, last year we had a public-private partnership program in Indonesia in partnership with the local governments to build a few community engagement pilot programs to help introduce nutrition education to primary school kids to help them to understand how to keep a balanced diet, and also introduce the healthy breakfast meals into the several schools in the local community to really help in terms of educating the school children in terms of healthy diet.
Thank you, Ifan. So that was very interesting to note. So I think this is one of the features of food safety, where the private sector is very active and increasingly getting even more active in the areas of food safety, and especially where they begin to interface with the SDGs. So at this, I'll just come back very quickly. We are into essentially the last 10 minutes of today. So before we close, just a couple of more questions to both Dr. Manu and Mr. Chuling. So if I may ask you just, very frankly, when Samoa and Tonga trade with each other, are there issues, or is it fairly open and not at all, you don't have any such barriers related to food safety? Over to you, maybe Dr. Manu first.
From Tonga to Samoa, mostly watermelon, fresh watermelon. I think that's about it. Because of the shipping of the transport, the train, it comes from New Zealand, goes to Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, New Zealand. But it seems to be in the wrong way around. So if we export something to Samoa, it will have to go around Fiji before New Zealand and Fiji. But we have a ship that once it's a private ownership, so it's not a regular freight transport. But most of its commercial cargo is watermelon. That's the most that I can think of.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Dr. Chuling.
Thank you very much. I think one of the main challenges that we face when we trade using Samoa and Tonga is in terms of transportation. I mean, there is the frequency of direct flights from Tonga to Samoa is almost zero. And also in terms of sea freight and the different routes that the shipping agencies takes, and it's one of the main challenges that we face in terms of trading. But as you will, basically, I'm sure you are aware that we have the PESA Plus regional agreement in the Pacific region between Australia, New Zealand, and all the other Pacific Island countries, which encourages freer trade between the Pacific Island countries as well as between New Zealand and Australia. So in terms of problems trading, we have the PESA Plus, and we also have the PICTA. The PICTA is a trade agreement just between Pacific Island countries. And the main objective of that agreement was to encourage free trade between the Pacific Island countries. So there are still some challenges in those trade arrangements, but it's there. And we have already started the process that Dr. Manu has mentioned, the watermelons, which we have experienced the sweetness of that fruit from Tonga. And we want to continue to see that, because watermelon doesn't grow well here in Samoa. I don't know why. I just don't know why, but it's one of the favorite fruits that has been exchanged between the two countries. And also, I think we still open the trade in terms of crops and staple product. I mean, crops that both countries share commonly. But we also acknowledge SPS issues, which is very important, and the rules of origin and all that under the existing agreements that I mentioned earlier. But to me, the main challenge is transportation, the cost of it. Thank you.
Yes, that's a very good point to finish with. The cost of transportation can be prohibitive, and especially for fresh produce where you need to maintain the temperature, that can actually get very, very, very high indeed. And therefore, there is always the temptation that we just go with hardly any preservation at all, and that leads to other food safety issues. So that's a very good point you pointed out. So here, just one more thing I would just like to ask all of you, and before we conclude. So do you see, maybe we'll start with you, Dr. Manu, do you see that we need, one of the things that has happened recently is the CC-NASWAP has prepared its very first standard. This was on kava, and it has now been adopted as a regional standard. So do you see this as the way forward, regional standard, so that you can have more trade between yourselves? Because sometimes international standards or just going up right all the way is a bit tough. So this might be a stepping stone. And would you subscribe to more regional standards in the coming days, in the coming years? Over to you, Dr. Manu.
Taking the follow-up on nano products. Nano was accepted by the European market, and they had a standard. Well, nano is being exported as a food, as a flavor in other food products. So it's products are becoming it's just a Pacific product. So only the Pacific countries is the main consumer. But when it became a food from the Codex food standard, the kava can be extracted and used as flavor in lollies, drinks. I think Manwater has already had a soft drink flavored with the kava product. So the scope of its market now it's going to increase. So the market increase. So the income will be increased to the Pacific country. So that's where we see the potential opportunities with the gold extended accepting cover as a food. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Manu. So, Dr. Chuling, so does having regional standards make it easier for you?
Yes, I think despite the fact that we all have our own national interest in terms of developing these standards, but at the end of the day, we need to work together in order for us to benefit. We need to work on a regional basis. And a regional standard, like the examples that my colleague has mentioned, we have now the non-regional standard adopted, as well as the CAVA regional standard, which will make it easier for us to trade, removing the unnecessary barriers that comes as hurdles when we try to, because instead of trying to go all the way to other markets, we can start from our region. So to have these regional standards is very important to support the national efforts that we put into these developments. So fully agree and would like to see the fruition of that approach in the longer term, if things will get back to a new normal again. Thank you.
What do you see? Are you going to increase your involvement in the Pacific? Ifan?
Happy to answer this question as well. And that I also agree with Dr. Manu and Mr. Pluto in terms of the support and the flexibility in order to have a regional standard to really help the regional trade of such commodity in the region. And in addition, personally, I think that trade is not restrained into one particular region. Trade should be applicable to the global space. So on the one hand, I think that having the regional standard could really help to facilitate and speed up the process to support in terms of developing a new standard on such product. On the other hand, I also wish that probably in the near future, we can also see this regional standard to be applied into the international space. So in development of this regional standard, we should also bear in mind the application when it comes to international trade as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ifan. It is right now my great pleasure to thank all of you, Ifan, Dr. Mano, and Dr. Chu Ling for joining us. We are sorry for a bit of the initial hiccups, but I think it worked out well. We all used both a combination of all technologies to put this together. So thank you everyone for joining, and don't forget to join us 2 days from now on Thursday. We are going to have a very interesting session on misinformation. I'm sure there'll be many things for everyone to learn from there. So thank you all once again. Have a good day, and I hand it back to Masami.
Thank you very much, Sridhar. So now that I have a pleasure to show you the wonderful video from the region, now that we think about the Samoa and Tonga, and then we are now thinking about those Pacific Ocean. So now it's perfect video to show that today's video finishes with the video from the Cook Island. As Sridhar said, see you on Thursday. Log back in using the same link, and then I will see you there, and then stay safe. Bye-bye.
The steadily growing population of tourists and visitors to our islands during the past 5 to 10 years has also increased the demand for fresh produce, in particular fruits and vegetables. This demand has also brought about some challenges as farmers try to increase their use of inorganic pesticides and fertilizers to try and maintain or manage the level of pests in their crops. At the same time, to try and maintain the level of nutrition in the soil in order to maintain a high yield. Over the last 4 to 5 years, through our training programs to make farmers more aware of the many benefits of organic pesticides, we have seen a 20% or even more in some cases of the use of organically based pesticides by our farmers. We continue to see this positive trend where more and more farmers are using organic and biologically based pesticides. The ministry also promotes the use of other methods of managing pests in crops, including adjusting of spacing, using machinery to manage weed problems, and also hand weeding where possible, where farmers are able to utilize these means which are non-chemical. The ministry, together with the financial and technical support of the Food and Agriculture Organization of FAO, was successful in implementing a project at enhancing crop production while at the same time improving soil resources management for sustainable livelihood. The project largely focused on improving soil resources management through increased use of organic matter, use of cover crops, and minimizing soil tillage. Farmers were trained on the importance of improving soil health in order to improve the tolerance or in order to increase the tolerance of their crops to pests and diseases. Currently, the ministry is working on a project with FAO and also the Secretariat of the Pacific Community, a regionally based organization that works together not only with FAO, but with other donor partners and other implementing partners on many agriculture projects. The current project will help us look into our legislation and how we can improve our legislation to try and address the current issues, in particular around the importation and use of pesticides, especially moving towards looking at safer alternatives or alternatives based around organic pesticides and biologically based pesticides.